Hello and welcome to today's video. We're going to have an introduction to counting. And counting is often labeled as the most difficult part of discrete math, so it's really important that you get the fundamentals first before we get into much more difficult stuff. The good thing is it's going to start out pretty easy. But just so you know, knowing the formulas for this unit is not enough. You really need to think about what the question is asking and then be creative to kind of modify a formula for that situation. So a lot of math classes in the past, you've probably been able to get by with just knowing formulas. Just so you know, that's not going to work here. You really have to kind of be creative, and it's tough. So good thing is we're going to start off easy, and this should be pretty intuitive. So first, the principle of addition. So this is called the sum rule of counting. And the official definition is for two separate tasks, if task A can be done in ways and task B can be done in ways, then A and B can be done in n plus m ways. So just look at an example. There's no real point to stick around on that definition. So how many different ways can you draw a jack or an ace in a standard deck of cards? So I'm just drawing a card from the 52. So there's 52 cards in the deck. That's important, so make sure you have that down. So 52 cards in a deck. There's four different faces. There's hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. And each one of those has one jack and an ace. So that means I have four aces and I have four jacks total in the deck. Four jacks. And notice that none of them overlap. There's not a card that I could draw that would be an ace and a jack. That would change our probability here, so we don't have to worry about that. So what the sum rule says is that now if I want to know how many ways can I draw a jack or an ace, I'm just going to add up the ways I can draw the ace and add up the ways I can draw the jack. So it's going to be 4 plus 4 equals 8. And that should be pretty intuitive. There's 8 different ways I could draw a jack or an ace in a standard deck of cards. Because there's 52 cards, 8 of them are either a jack or an ace. So that's the sum rule of counting. Pretty intuitive. The product principle is also intuitive. And this is often called the product rule of counting. So in a list, A through B, if there are n ways of choosing A and m ways of choosing B, then there are n times m ways of choosing A and B. So what I like to think is it doesn't have to just be A and B. So let's say we had a list like A, B, C, all the way to, I don't know, D, E or something, whatever it is. And this has n ways, this has m ways, so on. All you have to do to figure out the total ways that you can choose this entire list is multiply these numbers. So n times whatever, however many choices you have here. So it's basically the list of options. So list slash options. And then it's the number of choices you have for that option that you multiply. So you multiply all the choices. So let's take a look at this example here. How many different ways can I customize my phone? Assume there's 6 different storage options, 8 different colors, and 2 different firmwares. Well, let's think. What are my options? First I have, well, my first choice, I guess, is going to be the storage. And then I'm going to have to choose my color. And then I'm going to have to choose my firmware. So these are my 3 options. This is the list basically. So now how many choices do I have for each one? If I can spell firmware. Okay, so now how many choices? Well, for my storage I have 6 different choices. For my color I have 8, and for my firmware I have 2. So what you do is, well, if you have 6 different ways to choose a firmware, we got 6 times, and now you have 8 different ways to choose a color. So if you think about it, it's because for every storage that I choose, any of the 6, I have 8 different options for my color. So firmware 1 with color 2 is different from firmware 1 with color 3, and so on. So there's 8 different options for every firmware, and there's 8 different options of color for every storage, and there's 6 colors. So that's the 6 times 8. And then for all of those options, we have 2 options for our firmware. So that's why we multiply by 2 again, and that gives us 6 times 8 is 48, times 2 is 96. There's 96 different ways to customize my firmware, and that is the product principle. So make sure you notice the difference and kind of just think about why these rules work. Knowing the intuition is important, and this product principle especially, it's going to come up later on. So make sure you know this one here, because sometimes there'll be some complex problems that really just boil down to knowing the product principle. So sometimes they're easier than you think. Alright, so let's look at some practice. How many different ways can I roll a 2 or a 4? Well, this is just a roll of a dice. So let's think, do we need to use the product principle or the sum principle? I'm going to think about my dice roll. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I want to know how many different ways can I roll a 2 or a 4. Well, 1 and 2. I just put the line on the 5. There's 2 ways, and that's just the sum principle. Because all I'm doing is adding up the 1 way to roll a 2 and then the 1 way to roll a 4, and that's it. There's 2 ways I can do it. Okay, so next one, how many different ways can I customize a license plate that has 5 letters and then 2 numbers? So let's think about this. I'm going to write my license plate right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so the first 5, so these 5 are all letters. And then my last 2 are going to be numbers. And we need to think, how many options for letters do I have? And how many options for numbers do I have? Because that's what we're going to have to multiply together. This is obviously going to be a product principle 1 because it's a list. I have number 1, option 1, option 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 7 different situations and I have n choices for each one. And that's what I'm figuring out right now. How many choices do I have for each of the letters and how many choices do I have for all of the numbers? So, well, let's think about how many letters we have. We obviously have 26. So each of these is going to be 26 different options that I can choose from. So there's 26 letters and there's no restrictions. I could use the same letter every time, so I don't need to worry about that. And then now how many numbers? Well, I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 9. Obviously can't be double digit because that would be the whole thing. So that's going to be times 10. Okay, because you could be 0. So that means that our answer would be 26 to the 5th times 10 to the 2nd. That's the number of ways that I could customize my license plate given these conditions right here. So hopefully that makes sense because you get 26 options for the first 5 situations, for the first 5 numbers, and then you get 10 options for the last 2 ones. So those are the ways I can customize my license plate, and you'll notice how quickly this number rises. If you do this on your calculator, you're just going to get a huge number. So it's pretty interesting to see how many different ways you can organize just 5 letters and 2 numbers. Hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully now you kind of have the general understanding of the basic rules, so the principle of addition and the product principle, and just make sure you got this foundation because we're going to get into a lot more difficult stuff later on, and we're even going to extend these 2 rules in the next video. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a good one.